Welcome to the portion of our course where we will consider John Milton's Paradise Lost, perhaps one of the greatest epic poems ever written. The first page of this text, if you follow with me, sets out very clearly his goal, the poet's goal, under the argument. There is a summary here in front of each book, followed by the actual words of the poet. I want you to notice that as I've written and read my text, I've filled the margins with notes to help me understand what I thought was important, and I encourage you always to do that when you read, because it helps you get oriented, helps you remember, helps you prepare for your writing in the journals, in the discussions, and in your papers. Also helps prepare for exams. So the first page sets out of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe. With loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us and regain the blissful seat. Sing, heavenly muse. And so that greater man who will restore us is Christ. Adam and Eve fell, brought all our woe. This is the tale of paradise, Eden, lost. Why is there sin and evil in the world? Sing, heavenly muse, that I may assert eternal providence and justify the ways of God to men. So that is the poet's not so humble aim, to assert eternal providence, God's omnipotence, and justify the ways of God to men. A little bit about John Milton. He is perhaps one of the greatest 17th century British poets. Matchless, according to some. Published this work in 1667. It is an epic poem and a theodicy. A theodicy is a poem that asserts that God is good and tries to explain why there is evil in the world, if there is a good God. London in John Milton's day was still a walled medieval city of narrow lanes, muddy streets, mostly wooden buildings, already becoming one of the most important trading centers in the world. And what was once open country between it and the nearby town of Westminster was rapidly filling up as London expanded. Queen Elizabeth I had died in 1603. James I was on the throne. Tensions between the king and the parliament and between the Anglican Church and the Puritans would soon lead to civil war. John Milton participated in these tensions, which eventually resulted in the execution of James' son, Charles I. As always, in times of trouble, literature flourished. Milton himself was born in 1608 as Shakespeare's career was coming to a close, and he died in 1674, blind, some think, because of so much reading by candlelight, at least in part. At the age of 23, he was worried that he wouldn't amount to anything, though he would eventually become one of the greatest men of English letters. He wrote this poem, How soon hath time, the subtle thief of youth, stolen on his wing my 23 year. My hasting days fly on with full career, but my late spring no bud or blossom showeth. Perhaps my semblance might deceive the truth that I to manhood am arrived so near, and inward ripeness doth much less appear. So you see here that even though his days are flying by, he showed no bud or blossom, no evidence of fruit. And although he looks physically like a man, he is concerned that inwardly he isn't so mature and his career hasn't shown anything significant. His parents intended to enter the priesthood in the Anglican Church, but he became disillusioned with the conservatism, the worldliness, the increasing authoritarianism of the church, so he abandoned that course and he devoted himself to letters. He was a revolutionary intellectually and personally. He challenged the authority of the king. He challenged the authority of established religion. And though he was a faithful Christian throughout his life, he felt that the corrupt church and the corrupt monarchy had to go. So he won many enemies in this way. Now we say this is an epic poem. What does that mean? It includes grand subject matter. For example, Homer wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey that describe the founding of Rome. Beowulf, in our own course, described what it meant to leave a legacy and live a meaningful life. Okay? This epic poem has battles between God and the forces of good and Satan and the forces of evil. It has descriptive scenes of battle, noble speeches that consider grand themes and larger human truths, intellectual debates about what is meaningful in life, about things like authority or about things like good and evil, about the nature of God and the nature of humankind. Many elaborate descriptions, poetic, elevated language, similes and other forms of figurative language like metaphor to make the text rich, supernatural interventions, omens, magic, power, in this case divine power, and of course the invocation of the muse, which we heard in part at the very beginning of the poem. A theodicy is, according to Merriam-Webster, a defense of God's goodness and omnipotence, meaning his omnipotence, his all-powerful nature, in view of the existence of evil. The question being, if God is good, and if God is all-powerful, why is there evil in the world? Many enduring themes exist in this text. If there is a loving God, why do we suffer so? That's the theodicy mentioned. What is freedom? True freedom. Is it independence in doing whatever we want, or is it submission to God's will? Whence comes true freedom? What are the limits of human reason? What is the price of ambition, pride, revenge? What is truth? There's a contrast between wisdom and folly. So I'd like to read a couple of passages that illustrate some of these themes and demonstrate some of the main events in the plot. And we'll begin with page 69 and a little bit farther. This is Satan after his fall from heaven. He's sort of waking up in Eden. Okay? Sometime toward Eden, which now in his view lay pleasant, his grieved look he fixes sad. Sometimes toward heaven, and the full blazing sun, which now sat high in his meridian tower, then much revolving, thus in sighs began, O thou that with surpassing glory crowned, looks from thy sole dominion like the God of this new world. The sun, at whose sight all the stars hide their diminished heads, to thee I call, sun, but with no friendly voice, and add thy name of sun to tell thee how I hate thy beams. Satan hates the beautiful sunlight that bring to my remembrance from what state I fell, that state of heaven and communion with God. How glorious once above thy sphere, till pride and worse ambition threw me down. I was once glorious above the sphere of the sun until I was thrown down by pride and ambition, warring in heaven against heaven's matchless king, God. Ah, wherefore? He deserved no such return from me, whom he created. What I was in that bright eminence, and with good upbraided none. Nor was his service hard. What could be less than to afford him praise, the easiest recompense, and pay him thanks? How do? Yet all his good proved ill in me, and wrought but malice. Lifted up so high, I disdained subjection, and thought one step higher would set me highest. Satan wants to be God, and in a moment quit the debt immense of endless gratitude. So I rejected, he's saying, the requirement of gratitude expressed, the submission to God's will. So burdensome, still paying, still to owe, forgetful what from him I still received. I forgot what I was getting, for which I deserved to be grateful. And I understood not that a grateful mind by owing owes not. If you give gratitude, you are debt-free, but still pays at once, indebted and discharged. What burden then? Oh, had this powerful destiny ordained me some inferior angel, I had stood then happy, no unbounded hope, and raised ambition. Yet why not some other power as great might have aspired, and me, though mean, drawn to his part? But other powers as great fell not, but stand unshaken from within, or from without to all temptations armed. Hadst thou the same free will and power to stand? Thou hadst. Whom hast thou then or what to accuse? But heaven's free love dealt equally to all. What have I to accuse, except for unconditional love? Be then his love accursed, since love or hate to me alike it deals eternal woe. So now if whether I am loved or hated, I am suffering because I have rejected God. So then let God's love be accursed, Satan says. Nay, cursed be thou, since against his thy will choose freely what it now so justly rues. Me miserable, which shall I fly? Infinite wrath and infinite despair. Me miserable. Satan's cry at having awakened on earth. And so he looks at a subject to suffer because of his misery. Satan desperately wants something to pay for the wrong that he feels. And so he identifies Adam and Eve and says, I will overturn their happiness in Eden. So let's look at another passage. This is the temptation. Much transpires in the poem before we get to this point, but here we are. Now this comes on page 186 of your textbook if you wanted to follow along. And this is in Book 9 of Paradise Lost, not long after the beginning of the book. Line 680 or so, you see. The tempter, all impassioned, thus began, O sacred, wise, and wisdom-giving plant, Mother of science, now I feel thy power within me clear, not only to discern things in their causes, but to trace the ways of highest agents deemed however wise. Queen of this universe, do not believe those rigid threats of death. So he's saying, Eve, queen of this universe, don't believe God when he tells you that if you eat of the fruit of the tree, you'll die. Don't believe those threats of death. Ye shall not die. How should ye? By the fruit? It gives you life. To knowledge, it's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? To knowledge by the threatener, is God going to kill you? Is knowledge going to kill you? Is fruit going to kill you? I don't think so, Satan says. Look on me. This is the serpent speaking. She doesn't see Satan, right? Me who have touched and tasted, yet both live, and life more perfect have attained than fate meant me by venturing higher than my lot. So he's saying, I'm a serpent, I've eaten the fruit, I have gained knowledge of good and evil, I have challenged God's authority, and now I am better because of it. You will be like me, he's suggesting. Shall that be shut to man, which to the beast is open? Or will God incense his ire for such a petty trespass, and not praise rather your dauntless virtue? Won't he just praise you for eating the fruit, whom the pain of death denounced, whatever thing death be, deterred not from achieving what might lead to happier life? Knowledge of good and evil. Of good, how just? Why not want knowledge of good, Satan says. Knowledge of good must be good. Of evil, if what is evil be real, why not known, since easier shunned? So in other words, if there's evil, you should know it, because then you can shun it, or you can avoid it. God, therefore, cannot hurt ye and be just. Not just, not God. Not feared nor obeyed. In other words, a just God could never hurt you, so do what you want. So you see Satan here in Milton's Paradise Lost, fallen in rebellion because he wanted true freedom, to find himself shackled after attaining what he described as true freedom. So he wishes then to shackle others. And he then begins to question, so what and who is the character of God? Does God love you? Is God just? If you ever are harmed, then you could never be serving a just God. So Satan's role in this text is to sow the seeds of doubt. And that's what you find Adam and Eve considering. Well, so much more happens in the text. The notes provide guidelines as to those major themes. And I encourage you to look at the notes. The documentary will also help. I'll make sure that that's linked properly. So I encourage you to read the text carefully, follow the notes, and look at the documentary, and that should inform your journal. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention to Paradise Lost, one of the greatest epic poems